Hello, friends, and welcome to the Friday conversation. Hope everyone had a great week. We had a topic, but things happen, and so we're just going to kind of see what happens today. We're going to have a few fun things to discuss. But to start off, before we start, well, first I'll start with what I'm drinking because Jarrod mentioned getting beer. I'm drinking Into the Stratosphere. It's a hazy double IPA by Eddie Line Brewery. I believe that's out of Denver.
Oh. Nice.
Yeah, a little spaceman on there. He looks like a happy spaceman because he's drinking lots of beer. So
what makes
what's the difference between a
IPA?
single and a double IPA?
I think it's the amount of hops.
Okay.
Or the kind of hops. But it's basically, I think this is what, like 9%.
Wow.
It's pretty beefy, but it's not very, it's not very heavy. Like it's not, some beers you could really taste the alcohol, and some beers it's just tasty. So they're wizards.
Can we have a backup
brewers.
plan though, just in case? You say 9%, it's not too heavy, it's fine. But if you pass out at any stage here, I nominate Carl to take over.
Yeah,
eyelids getting heavy.
I wasn't to have. There was another. There's in my fridge. There was a barley wine. It was Into the Woods. It had like a wizard on it. I thought it's fitting, but I ended up grabbing this one. So I think that's like 13%. So
wizard.
Hey, it's Friday. Come on, let's go.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going out and celebrating my dad's birthday in a bit, and definitely gonna have a Mai Tai or two. So
nice.
It'll be good. Yeah.
Cool. So I got distracted. Jarrod, can you give us an introduction and tell us what you're drinking?
Jarrod from the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel and pagechewing.com enthusiast. I am drinking.
That's the first time I've ever heard that.
I am drinking Samuel Adams, which, being from Massachusetts, that only makes sense. And the Holiday White Ale is a new special edition. Citrus and hazy. Citrusy and hazy. So had to pick it up. Sounded great. And it is great because this is my second one, so it's good.
2 thumbs up, or two bottles up, as it were.
Yeah. And Chris.
Yes, my name's Chris. Sometimes YouTuber, sometimes appear on other people's channels. And because I'm Irish, I'm drinking a Spanish beer, San Miguel. Just normal, standard San Miguel. I tend to look at what is a reasonable price and go, I'll get 12 of those, thanks. That's generally my thing. If I'm feeling a bit more, like I only want a couple, I'll go my craft beers at that stage, and I usually buy from a local brewery called Hilton Brewery, who do a really nice IPA called Twisted Hop, which is excellent. But not tonight.
And I am Carl D. Albert, indie fantasy author, and very another page chewing enthusiast, a fellow page chewing enthusiast, if you will. I am only drinking coffee and water at the moment, but I'm a big cider guy. All types of cider, like alcoholic, non-alcoholic in general. Around the holidays like this, when everyone's drinking like warm apple cider, that's my shit. Like I love it. But big Angry Orchard fan, also fan of the drier ciders. Just like a little fruity kick, I guess. But yeah, not an IPA guy. I've tried. I bounce off. That's one that I just have never gotten into.
It's a funny one because when I was even mid-30s, 10 years ago, I was very anti-IPA, I have to say. And then I think I just got to stage one day that it was just a bit like you're saying, because some of the IPAs can be sort of fruity, kind of like in that kind of really warm summer day, and I didn't want like a lager, I wanted something a bit else, and it just hit right that day. And from that moment, it was like, okay, we're good. We're in.
You know what? While we're talking about booze, has there ever been a book, fantasy, sci-fi, or otherwise, that has inspired you to try a drink? Or has there ever been a drink you've read about that you've been like, it made up or not, like, oh, I want to try that. Like, that sounds really good. Or favorite drinking scenes? I don't know. I'm just spitballing, throwing stuff out here now.
It's a good question.
Good question. They did make a line of craft beers based upon Game of Thrones. So I have a collection of 6 bottles that I got them all. I don't remember what they're called, but
unopened.
what's that? No,
Unopened?
no,
Six beers?
I drank them all.
Thank God. I just thought this was going to be one of these collection things that sits on a shelf somewhere. And you're
but
like,
I kept the bottles because
I spent $1,500.
They're in the cellar somewhere.
Were they good?
Yeah, some of them were good, some better than others, but I like craft beers, so it's right up my alley.
Did you say, are there like 6 houses or
they had there was 6
what
different
beer stuff?
6 different bottles, 6 different types, and one was like a white ale that it was like White Walker ale or something like that, and one of them was was a hoppy lager was related to House Lannister somehow. It was so they had all different kinds trying to make them the different houses and stuff like that, and so they were good. It was a little collector's run they had. I don't know how they got the
nice.
I remember seeing them. I don't think I ever got any of them.
Yeah, they were bigger bottles,
but that was on the list. Yeah. I do know. I mean, just to answer my own question, particularly like growing up reading like Norse mythology and stuff, and you'd continue to see, mead was like always on my bucket list, and I always imagined it was going to be like more like an ale. Just because I associate Viking, like I don't know, but it's not at all. It's very sweet, right? It's honey wine. And after years and years of like hunting it down, I finally tried it, and I was like, oh, that's all right. Like I wasn't blown away.
I have a mead tale.
Yep.
If you guys want to hear this, I set
Let's
out.
Go.
My friend and I set out to make our own mead. This is way back in the 90s, and we, of course, we never did it before, so we didn't know what we were doing. And we ended up buying champagne yeast to use to make the mead. And the mead, we read about it. It was like, oh, you got to wait at least a year, to do all the full fermentation to get the real good flavor and all that stuff. So, we did. We bade our time, and we popped open that first bottle and was like, wow, this is fantastic. It was a little bit bubbly, and it was like, this is great. And it was like, and then they said, wait 3 years to get the real full good effect of a good mead. All right, it's fine, right? So we waited. And, so we while we're waiting for our mead to get better, we of course went to a store and bought some mead at a store. We're like, oh, we got to try some other ones. We didn't even try any before we tried to make our own. This is how dumb we were, right? So, so then we bought some stuff finally to try it, and we're like, wow, this is really bland and fruity. Like it didn't have any fizz. It didn't. It was kind of. It was kind of like it was alcohol-y, but it wasn't. Didn't have that nice fizz I was looking for. And we're kind of like, oh, geez, I hope if we wait 3 years, it's not gonna taste like this, So after 3 years, we tried some more, and it was even better. It was like a champagne honey wine, and it was outstanding. And so I went and I went down to my cousin's in Connecticut, and every year he's part of an association that had a beer tasting contest. And I said, and I brought a case of that mead with me and entered a beer tasting contest with it, and I won. And all the people there who put their beer in there, like slaved over making beer every year in this contest, they were pissed because like, this is not a mead. This is not a beer. He shouldn't have won, all that stuff. But I took my blue ribbon and I left Connecticut forever. So. And
you came, you saw, you conquered. Game over.
And we'd never been able to replicate that. It was like one of the best drinks I ever had, and I couldn't replicate it.
Couldn't hit that high again. but also wanted in Connecticut for crimes against beer.
Yeah.
Yeah. 3 years. That's a long time to wait. And like, cross your fingers. I hope it'll get better.
And then
I don't have that kind of patience.
and my friend actually kept some bottles, and he opened some like 7 years later, and he was like, "It's still outstanding. Can't make it again, though."
But he was dead 3 days later.
One of a kind.
New thing for the bucket list.
Yeah.
All right, Steve, Chris, what about you? Any book drinks?
I don't think. I'm even trying to think of food scenes. I don't think I can think of any. In fact, I might actually just skip over those whole parts to get to the bar fight, which is the interesting part, you know.
Love a good bar fight.
Yeah, bar fights. Bar fights are awesome.
I will say also summer wine. I don't know if this is a real thing, but it sounds good. Lovely name from A Song of Ice and Fire. Summer wine. I want to drink a summer wine. I don't know if that's real or not, but it sounds good.
Sounds refreshing.
Considering their summers are like a decade long. That could be a thing. Yeah,
that's true. But maybe it's also one of those things that it's just wine to drink in summer and just call it summer wine.
Right. It's got some ice in it or something.
Yeah. It's the Billy Connolly joke when he went to a restaurant and on the menu specials had potatoes of the night and he thought, oh my God, these are going to be incredible. But it was literally just the potatoes they had on that night.
The only really, I can't think of a specific drink, but whenever I think of bars, I always think of Michael R. Fletcher, like Beyond Redemption.
Okay. Yeah.
Even though those are like the worst bars, that's like the last bar you'd ever want to be in. I'm trying to think of other bars. I just read something recently. But
those are some of the most fun ones. You know, like the really shady ones, like in fantasy. I'm a big fan of really. I know he has like, he has like some like multiversal bar or something, right? In his books, and it's like in other people's books now too. It's like appearing.
The dripping bucket.
He has the bars and drinks in his definition of grimdark, though, doesn't he? He says actually the beer and the drinks served in bars actually is how grimdark a novel is or isn't, you know? Which I think is quite interesting.
I do love that definition. I think that's a lot of fun. That's really great.
I mean, it's pretty accurate. I think it's like
very much so.
You mentioned, Steve, not to veer into my own stuff, but you have been reading my stuff, and there is a bar in the beginning of that book. So I don't know if that's what you were thinking of.
Yeah, so I'm thinking. Yeah,
I love a tavern scene. I'm a sucker for a tavern scene, and so I was like, I have to find a way to write. And then luckily, it wasn't hard. Like when you got buddies, you know, you just write the buddies going out drinking. Like it's good.
It's a place for camaraderie and team building and like fights.
Yeah, I love it. Ideally, all three.
Yeah, it's a very social space as well, because you think of any times you've been in bars, if you've been there in a bar for a while, you might go in to have the first pint and have the first drink, but after that you start people watching and you start watching everything that's going on around you, and that's very much even with the bars in real life, and it lends itself then to exposition and events and books very, very well because of that very nature.
Oh, yeah.
I felt a little silly asking Robin, I think it was last year sometime, I asked her about pubs because everyone always talks about pubs in the UK and it's this big thing. It's like, is it a real thing? Like, is it just like some made up, like fairy tale? But no, it's a thing, like, apparently. So I want to go check it out. Like, it sounds like a lot of fun.
Is drink culture that different in America?
Well, we do pub crawling up here in Boston.
I do think there's a regional sort of like we definitely have pubs in LA, but the vibe was very different when I studied abroad in London, and that was one of the best parts was going to the pubs. You could drink for cheap and get good drinks. Oh man, I was living. My liver was not, though.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, there's a couple of things struck me when I went to America, and things like happy hour, like from 6 to 7. It seemed like other people went to happy hour and I'd kind of say it's a reasonable hour to go with your friends and socialise. A happy hour in Britain and Ireland is a race. It is literally how much you can drink in that hour for cheap.
Oh,
So
geez.
as you get towards the halfway part of the bottle, you're going, and the next one, thank you very much. I've probably told this story before, but I remember going into a student bar that I hadn't, drink prices and drink deals, etc. And I went in and they had on the board behind them, JD and Coke, 180. And I just went up the bar, hadn't been in a student bar in years, and I said, is it really 180 for a JD and Coke? And he says, yes, it is, sir. Would you like one? He says, no, I'll take 8. Give me the tray. Thanks very much.
Yeah, I think mead is one of those drinks that you always read about in fantasy that just sounds good, and you drink it and it's like,
it's okay. It's
fine.
You apparently got to get that 3-year champagne yeast mead. Like that's the secret sauce.
That's the trick.
The Vikings wouldn't have been as angry if only they had champagne yeast.
Exactly.
They would have stayed home, right?
No wonder they're going around pillaging. Yeah, exactly.
Ambrosia is actually ambrosia is actually champagne yeast. Yeah, that's what they're looking for.
They would have gone around just like spreading a big party. It wouldn't have been pillaging. It'd be like a big traveling party because they're having a good time. How history could have been different.
I want to watch that movie now. The like faux historical like bar crawl movie about Vikings like going out and on like a traveling like bar crawl. I don't know. They get up to hijinks like
quest.
Like what's the movie? I'm thinking of the like World's End, the Edgar Wright sci-fi movie, something like that, but with Vikings. Jotting that down.
It's a great idea.
That was a good idea.
I mean,
good idea for a short story.
Nearly every D&D campaign begins in a tavern, right? That's where all the characters meet up. Then the quest comes.
Yeah, so I should mention before I forget that this is episode 98. We do have plans for 99. So in 2 weeks, we'll have episode 100. And I think we're going to do like a 6-hour thing and just have people pop in and out as they want. So, but if anyone is listening and interested, check out the forum. We'll have a thread going there on,
wow.
I don't know. We'll think of something. I don't know how we're going to talk about for 6 hours, but see how it goes.
We should have games. We should have like podcast bingo. Things that people should be saying, like secret bingo cards and stuff, like play along at home, drinking games.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good idea to like, I love the games idea, and just in general, like definitely I feel like it requires a little preparation because 6 hours, that's a hell of a marathon.
That's a good one. Yeah, I think I'll do like 3 parts.
That makes sense.
Yeah, 100.
Yeah.
So before we went on, we were talking about comic books, and I'm reading single issues again because we're doing the weekly polls podcast over on the other podcast. And Mike, I managed to convince him to join me. Poor Mike. Weekly, just to talk about books. And I think it's tricky, and we discussed this on the podcast, but it's tough. And Carl, you mentioned you worked in a comic shop. I think it's tricky now because I think most people read trades, like the collected trades. So single issues, I think you have to hook your reader early.
Yeah.
And if you don't hook them, then you won't end up with the trade. But then most people read for trades. So it's this weird thing going on there. Hey, Varsha.
You were muted. Oh, there you are. You just missed us talking about drinks and fantasy mead, mostly.
Yeah.
Nice.
Varsha, you have to tackle Carl's question, which was... Go ahead, Carl.
Was any fantasy drinks, I mean, I don't know if you drink, any fantasy drinks that inspired you? You were like, I want to try that, whether it's real or fake, or otherwise favorite fantasy bar scenes?
So I don't drink alcohol, so none of that ever got me interested, but butterbeer.
Butterbeer, nice.
Yeah, especially I don't know what the consensus opinion is on the Universal Studios butterbeer, but I rather liked it. So
I thought it was delicious for like the first 2 sips, and then it was too rich. Like I was like, it was great just like for a little sip, and then I was like, okay, I'm good. In my family generally we like pass it around, and like everyone, it's like just enough. But I have a friend who like, I mean, he goes to Universal all the time. He's a big theme park guy, and he gets it every time he goes. He loves it.
I really, really liked it the first time. I think the second time I liked it a little less. I don't like sweet things quite as much as I did 10 years ago. So I suspect I'll not like it quite as much now, but I'm going to keep the memory of how I liked it.
All right, favorite fantasy bar scenes though, or favorite fantasy bars, if you have one of those.
Favorite fantasy bars.
I remember one.
Interesting. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Jarrod.
You'll probably remember this, Varsha. It's Cruel's Bar in Darujistan.
Yes. Yes.
Oh,
exactly.
yes. Yeah.
But there's
great.
also one scene, I think the second half of Reaper's Gale. I don't remember the name of the bar, but it's a seedy feeling establishment where they find someone they're looking for. I think I really like that aesthetic as well.
Malazan definitely has a number of good ones. Yeah, Darujistan, that's a great example. I'm pretty sure that's like how Jarrod, you mentioned, is like all great like D&D quests start in a bar, and I'm like pretty sure that's like
that's
how Malazan
yeah,
kind of
that's
started too.
Krupp and Murillo and Crocus and all those characters. That's where they congregate.
Oh, I mean even before, like I mean actual like campaigns and stuff that Cam and Steve ran. Like I swear they like those characters like Shadow Throne and Cotillion and stuff like ran a bar, and that there was something I this may be apocryphal. I may just be making this up, but I swear there's something, or like Lysine was like a bar owner, and that's how they met, or
No,
there's
right.
something there, and
It's
maybe
it's in the Path to Ascendancy, the prequels that Esselmont wrote. Yeah,
it is. Okay.
There's a bar in.
I haven't read.
There's a
I
bar
haven't
in
read those
Malice
yet,
City.
but
That's where they met. Yep.
There you go. Okay, boom. So that's a lot of fun. I love all the little D&D nods, you could say, in Malazan,
Yes.
particularly because the series is so, in so many ways, so unlike what I think of when I think of Dungeons and Dragons, just in terms of like how, when I think of D&D, I think of like kind of casual, lighthearted fun. And certainly there is that in Malazan, but it's also very dense and very dark and very serious. But like you also have like all the different elves. They have different names, but they're the elves. They're the elf races, and you have your take on orcs and things. And I love it.
Something for everybody.
Yes. I'm trying to think what other fantasy series I've read with like really good bars. I feel like Robin Hobb just in general writes good like cozy places, and so I think there's some good cozy like tavern scenes, but I don't remember one distinctly.
I didn't want to take the easy way out, but I think one of the first scenes that comes to my mind is Lord of the Rings.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
the tavern scene. I mean, that's like too easy, right? I mean, but that's one of the ones that kind of pop in your mind just because it's so iconic. Yeah.
But it's a people watching again. Again, it's that man sitting in the corner. What's
it's good you mentioned it, Steve, though, because if you didn't, I'm sure some listener out there is going to be like, "Why didn't you talk about the Lord of the Rings tavern?"
You idiots.
Strider. Yeah. What is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Any others? I don't know. Song of Ice and Fire has some, but like I wouldn't say they're particularly memorable. Like they're not like the parts of like, I don't know. I just don't think of them a lot. Like there's a place where Hot Pie works, but like I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I like Hot Pie, but I'm not crazy about his tavern scenes.
Dresden has Murphy's if you read Dresden, although it's not. There's only a couple of major scenes in there in the entire series, but it's not just a bar, but it's a safe haven. It's got kind of protected zone within that world. So there's that one. What else? I feel like there should be loads. I feel like it should be springing off, but
I know exactly. I'm like I feel crazy. Like I can't think of more. You would think Joe Abercrombie would have some, just like with the type of stuff he writes, but I feel like he doesn't really. Like when I think of the First Law trilogy, I don't know that they ever like stop in a bar. And even in like with Orso in the second trilogy, I don't know that there's ever any like bar scenes. They kind of he just like parties on his own.
Yeah, I mean every D&D book novel has one. The most famous being the Wandering. What is it called? The Wanderers. I don't know. I forget the one in Dragonlance, where all the companions first meet up. But they all have them. It's just whether or not they're going to stick in your mind, I guess, because they kind of blend together over the years.
There is a bar scene in Curse of the Mistwraith, right? In the first book.
Oh yeah.
I just started that.
Oh,
I'm like 50 pages in. Very much enjoying it.
You can catch us.
Yeah, definitely can.
Yeah, you probably could. Yeah, maybe.
It'll be. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. How quickly I go through them.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of scenes.
Dense reads.
Yeah. You'll get to the end of the first book and kind of go, I want to read more, but it is kind of, I sort of like the pace we're going on it because it does force you to live in it, live with what's happening in the events kind of slowly. Although there are times where you get to the end of your little section, you go, oh man, let's keep going.
Yeah.
It should be posed like, let's go.
I know.
He's so patient.
It's so cool that he's so passionate about it.
Yeah.
I like the feeling of coming back to the series, for which it's necessary to take a break.
Yeah.
I feel like I'll have to really push myself if we went back to back without breaks. But yeah, I like the pace that we're doing it at too. But what I think fantasy needs more of is coffee shops.
Oh.
I can't think of any. I haven't read what's that?
Legends and
Lattes. Yeah, I haven't read it yet. But are there any other books that do coffee shops instead of taverns?
Yeah, most fantasy books are medieval based, so I don't know if coffee came into the picture yet in that medieval type of terminology. Maybe tea, but
I think they had coffee, but I don't know. Like you would think, I don't know that coffee shops were like a thing, or like kind of traditional cafes. It certainly seems like something that I would associate as like an anachronism, but that may not be the case. I mean, there are a lot of things. It's like have you guys heard of the Tiffany effect?
Mm-mm.
Where Tiffany is like a classic name, like it goes back like thousands of years, but like if you had a character in a medieval novel or in a fantasy called Tiffany, a lot of readers would be like, that's not right. Like, no, I don't think so. Princess Tiffany, no thank you. And it's just it's about playing with the knowing what the audience is going to expect.
There's a challenge, writer's challenge. That's the first writer's challenge of January. Write a believable fantasy world with Tiffany.
the great wizard Tiffany.
The great wizard Tiffany. And you have to squeeze in the line, I think we're alone now, at some stage in the story.
Oh. Yeah. Nice. I like that. You have to write it in a shopping mall.
Yeah. This thing's writing itself. I know what you're saying.
Yeah, fantasy shopping mall. I'm liking where this is going. It's good.
So anyway,
back to comics.
Back to comics, but so I think it's a tough thing to balance because as a creative team, if you don't have a successful book, then you run the risk of it not continuing. So you have to hook the reader, and you have to leave kind of like cliffhangers at the end of every single issue. But also you have to consider how it will flow in a trade, because you don't want it to be the pacing to be off, and when it's collected together, so it's an odd balance to manage, I would guess.
Yeah, that was a new.
It's definitely
that was a new terminology that came out right after waiting for the trade was writing for the trade, where writers started to realize people were waiting for trades and started writing to better fit that format.
It's interesting too that you're seeing that. I don't want to say it's definitely not gone out of style, but that I do feel like it's become emphasized less in the last like few years. Like I feel like you're seeing more like single issue stories again and things like that. Even as like issues are getting shorter. I think even since like I was working in a comic book store, I definitely feel like some of the ways people have been writing comics have changed. I mean, you're also seeing trades get shorter, right? They used to be like 6 issues or even 8, and now a lot of them are like 5 or 4, which is, I mean, that's just one of the economics, right? It's like trying to improve their margins as everything is getting more expensive. But it's certainly can be frustrating as a consumer, certainly. But comics is a weird medium. I love it. I love it a lot. It's one of my first loves, but
it also creates a really nice reading experience for me, who does the person that reads trades, to kind of think, like, there's a couple of things we've done and went, oh my God, see, if I was reading this in a single issue that was coming out every so often, I would have been livid at this moment. Like, at this very moment, I would have thought, like, this is honestly wrath-inducing to have waited for some resolution of the story and just gotten this. What? Yeah, I feel like I'm reliving some bad experiences there. But reading it in a trade, it's kind of either a lot easier insofar as you either got to run before it or run after it, in some way. To kind of say that. So
it's almost like, writing like a book series too, where like you want each installment to kind of work on its own, but you also want to like entice the reader back for more. And certainly you need to have that hook, like you said, Steve. I mean, it's even harder in a sense in comics because you potentially only have that first issue. And so it's really important that you get your claws in them as quickly as possible. It's something also I've been thinking about. I've been trying to get more into writing comics. Actually, I'm working on a short right now for this anthology. Nice. This little indie anthology. I'm trying to. We're working on it. Just turning the last draft of the script, and the artist is getting to work on it. And that that's its own beast too. Is like trying to tell a compelling story in 8 pages, 12 pages. Similar to like short stories in prose. It's its own art, really. And it's certainly not something that I personally feel like I feel like longer form stories come much more naturally to me. Just lots of ideas and I want to throw them all out there. But, short stories, you really have to be like dig in. And I mean, that's the tricky thing too, with like that first issue, even in like longer series, is you want to seed room for more, but you don't want to throw too much to the audience where like they don't know what to latch on to. They need to get emotionally invested. Is a tricky thing.
And there's so many number ones every week. There's number ones everywhere, and it's tempting to not, this new shiny thing, and just not, But Chris, to your point, I'm reading Tenement now. It's the same creative team that wrote Gideon Falls, and it's like, this is really frustrating. Like, it's really, it's a big difference reading it in trade versus reading a single issue once every 3 or 4 weeks, because it's really
you're reading Tenements one at a time, one issue at a time. Yeah, I could see that because I remember, Chris, you bringing this up during Gideon Falls. Like, you couldn't imagine reading this one issue at a time, and I agreed with that assessment when we were reading those, because it really was not like, because we're like Steve, we're reading Sacrifices right now, and I'm having a great time with this because I feel like this is a bit more geared towards the monthly grind. There's almost a complete story in each issue while still being thoroughly connected with all the other ones. But I'm enjoying that one a lot. I couldn't say the same if we were reading Gideon Falls that way.
Gideon Falls is a tease every issue of teasing a little bit more mystery out. That's very much what it is, and you want sort of resolution of the mystery, but you need a chunk of issues in a time to get enough mystery to kind of give you some ideas. Even I think a single issue would kind of leave you a little frustrated and like I really don't know enough still. Even that hasn't progressed any from it's a bit like Lost was a bit like that. I know we talk about this an awful lot, but Lost was very much it built a bit over time. But they tried their best to do self-contained stories every week, and so far has been about a character development as well as eking out this tiny itty bitty bit of story. But they had 24 episodes to do that in per season as well, so they had a lot of space to fill.
Varsha, you're reading Sandman right now, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we read the first 8 issues. I think we're going to read the next 8 soonish.
But that's
the
8
bind
issues
up.
of that is pretty dense. That's a jam-packed volume 1 there with 8 issues. And because I remember, when you could read just one of those issues and get a good full story, a lot out of it, for the most part, especially early on in that series.
Later on too, they I'm on volume 8 of a reread. That was something I decided to pick up recently, and I kind of have been reading it in like chunks, and there are a lot of just really great short stories, basically like single issue stories.
Really
and
going
it's so,
for the monthly audience with those.
Oh yes, and it what's so striking to me that it didn't necessarily hit me on my first read. This is my second. Was just how non-traditional the storytelling is in that regard. Where like there are things you won't hear about for like years, and then they suddenly come back up. And like obviously, I'm going to avoid spoilers for you, Varsha, and anyone listening who hasn't read it, which everyone should read it, at least try it. It's really remarkable what he does, and the way that I think he was like making up a lot of it as he went along too, is my understanding. And I just think it's such a masterwork in like non-traditional like structures and storytelling. While at the same time, it's very much a product of comics, particularly comics back in like the 90s, where issues were a little longer. You had a lot more single issue stories, and he really made the most of it. And we've wove this like really rich tapestry that you don't have a full appreciation for it until you've read the whole thing and you see like just what he was doing and how all these little things you think are just like, oh, this is just one arc or this is just one short story, comes back into play like 20-30 issues later, or like all the way at the end of the series, and you're like, oh my god, and it was all there. Like you can see it all. It really is just remarkable and very inspiring.
I made the mistake of buying the big fat, the big collector's edition of the hardcover. Yeah, it's bad.
Those are difficult to read. I stopped reading Berserk on the deluxe editions too because they're so big and difficult to carry.
Unwieldy.
Yeah.
They look cool in the shop, though.
They do.
Very true.
This is what's important. That's
what matters.
It is that feeling of like, there is a trade-off between like having that tangible feeling of reading a comic in your hand. And I've read plenty, actually, even in Kindle. Like that can be that guided reading experience can be amazing. But also, I don't think that I get the same out of. I'll get the story better. I'll get the flow of the story better. I'll get the storytelling and the paneling and stuff to a certain extent. But I don't actually look at the artwork to the same extent, I don't think. In that, there's something about seeing the printed colours rather than kind of colours off a screen that doesn't quite connect in the same way.
You don't get the page turn the same way, too.
Yeah, that's right. That anticipation of it just as one flow.
That's an underrated, like... I mean, it just fundamentally changes the way you write for the medium. Like, I've been talking to a lot of, as I've been trying to like push into the industry, creators, and I was talking to Colin Kelly recently, who he lives in LA and went to the same school I did, and so connected, and he was super nice and helpful. But he's talking about like it's different, like you have your own challenges when you're writing comics as compared to writing like prose or movies or whatever, and like the page turn is one of them. Like that's one of the like parts of the craft of the writing that's like really important, but it changes too. Not that you don't have a page turn, you do. It just functions differently when you're reading something on a Kindle or anything like that.
Yeah, even the artist has to consider that page turning aspect because they have to lead your eye from panel to panel. But when it's going to the next page, they have a different, like artistic mandate on the end of that page to the next page.
Absolutely.
So it can get quite technical actually.
It's definitely something.
That's where they have the Joe
that I
Kubert
find
School for Art. I mean, there's a reason for that, and it's like, there's a lot to learn about it.
That aspect of pacing I find is a lot more technical and a lot less almost instinctual, at least in my experience, than things like writing for screenplays or, books where like, you don't know how it's going to be formatted, right? Like, I mean, even if you do your formatting yourself, like every page is a page, like people don't think about page turns, in books. And in movies, when you think about that sort of pacing, a lot of it comes in the edit, right? Where you're like thinking about individual cuts and things like that. But the actual like screenplay, I mean, you do think about that's not entirely true. You do think about page turns in screenplays, particularly early on when you're like trying to hook people, and that's a whole separate thing. But comics, it's much more like technical, like you said, Jarrod, and absolutely the writer and artist have to be on the same page. No pun intended.
But I think that's also why, certainly my experience of comics is that certain creative teams are like Blockbuster in some way. As soon as the creative team has got a new series coming out that people trust and kind of like their feed and style, they just kind of go, well, this is an auto buy, very much so, in probably more ways even than books or anything else. People can kind of dip in and out, but it feels like in the comic or graphic novel space, that's very much, some teams are like, yeah, here we go.
It's like a rock band.
I think a lot of it has to do with the amount of time investment too, because a novel takes you 10, 12, 15 hours to read, and a comic book takes you a 4 or 5 issue trade takes you like an hour and a half. So it's a lot more time investment. So I think people are more careful with longer form content like that with the novel. Stephen King can write whatever he wants. Like he could scribble on a page and people will buy it, but it's right. Not too often.
My youngest finished 1922 the other day. Had read the body. Stand by me for those that don't know. And kind of was like, yeah, it was okay. It was, it was an interesting story, whatever. So I give 1922 to read, which is properly gory in places, like seriously like messed up. But was reading it in school in like their reading periods. Was in the last 20 pages going, this is seriously effed up. And I'm sitting in the school kind of going, what the hell? Everybody else is reading like Harry Potter and whatever else, and I'm like, there's somebody's body just getting chopped up and put down a well. And the worst part is, this is sort of cool.
Yes. Get them while they're young.
Yeah.
Varsha, what's your experience with comics? Like, what comics have you read?
So I think in terms of comics, what I read when I was growing up, we had these monthly issue things that we'd get. What was it? Champak? No, that was a short story collection. It was called Twinkle or Tinkle. I don't remember, one of those. Twinkle, I think. And
Probably
it had
Twinkle over Tinkle. I can.
And this was before I knew the other meanings. And it just had a bunch of collected it had some recurring characters and stories about these characters. So there was this Supandi the fool, who'd do things like, hey, what's the time? He has a glass of milk in his hand and he'd turn it over because he has the watch also in the same hand. So anyway, dumb jokes like that. Akbar and Birbal, I don't know. I can't think of a Western story that sort of fits that format, but there are many stories of like the king and his clever minister who keeps pulling the king out of scraps. There's Akbar and Birbal. There's Tenali Raman, and I forget what his king, who his king is. Maybe Krishna Dev Raya. But anyway, this one was Akbar and Birbal. Birbal being the clever minister, and Akbar the emperor of India, who keeps getting himself into scraps, and Birbal keeps getting him out of it. And then there was Shikari Shambhu, who was Shikari the hunter, and he'd get himself into trouble while hunting animals. So anyway, there were all these stories of people that get collected into Tinkle/Twinkle comics that I'd read once a month. Um, I think my first acquaintance with the style of comics that you folks are familiar with was Sandman. I didn't even like or think I liked superhero stories until very recently. Sandman, I only decided to read because I'd read American Gods by Neil Gaiman and I loved it and I wanted to read more by the author. So I tried Sandman. I loved it. So I'm actually rereading it now for discussions, but I loved Sandman. I devoured the whole thing in a week, which I kind of sort of regret because I feel like I forgot a lot because of it, but also I can always read. Now I do want to try more comics. I still don't think I mean, I like superhero movies now. I don't think I have the patience for long drawn superhero stories. So, what I'm thinking is I'll follow the comics that you guys are reading for your discussions because those seem to be like a nice non superhero set that I can read. So, I'm planning to read Gideon Falls and I'm yet to read Night Fever.
Oh yeah.
And you're reading Fade Out soon,
Yeah,
right? I want to
that's
pick
great.
that up. So all of
Mine
those look
arrived.
interesting. So I'm gonna. I loved comics growing up, except not the superhero ones. And but I do have this collection of Black Panther done by I don't know how to say his name. It's Reed Coates. That's the last name.
Ta-Nehisi
But
Coates, yeah.
yeah, I want to try that. That seems interesting. I love the movies. If it's anything like that, I'll probably love the comics too. So
It inspired. There are parts of it that inspired, particularly the second movie. So yeah,
yeah,
he's a good writer.
I was a miserable wreck during the second movie. I cried through the whole thing.
Yeah.
Talking about that was a celebrity death that hit me
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
I think just because it felt so sudden, like we didn't know how sick he was,
Yeah.
and he was so young and so talented, and just it's really sad.
Well, like a lot of people that make it at a certain point in Hollywood or otherwise, you sort of think everybody's eternally young. But obviously, Chadwick had been working for many, many years in kind of obscurity in a lot of ways. Finally gets his break, and obviously was a lot older than we give him credit for, even though he still died very young. But it's that idea that to make it, often it's a life's work.
Yeah,
You even get to that stage.
absolutely. Yeah, it's the overnight success, that took like 10 years, right? Like that's the classic
exactly.
Hollywood story. Oh my God. Yeah. You hear about that all the time. It is usually when someone breaks in when they're really young, there's some relationship going on there, nepotism, that sort
Some
of thing.
pushing,
Or they really got pushed when they were like ridiculously young, they're like a child actor, and that's its own can of worms.
Yeah, there's very, very few of those actors that transition. As you know, it's just a very, very difficult transition for people to make, and lots of people have tried lots of different ways to do it. And often, what happens is that they usually carry some stigma throughout the rest of their life, regardless of what they did, to mitigate the kind of feeling of who they were as a younger person. Zac Efron would be a good example of that. Daniel Radcliffe would be another very good example of it. Of people that just can't shake off that thing they were first known for,
One of my favorite things, though, is like young actors like that, like Daniel Radcliffe, or Robert Pattinson is another good example. Elijah, like a lot of these like huge franchise, it often seems to be the men. The women, I mean, I don't know. Emma Watson's made a whole career for herself, but like the thing that I love is when they go and they've like made a bunch of money on a franchise, and then they go do a bunch of weird stuff. And they just like work on a bunch of like weird indie stuff, and they do whatever the hell they want. And I love that for them. Like I've loved following Daniel Radcliffe's career since Harry Potter. Like he's been into such a lot of like delightfully quirky roles. And he, in my opinion, is the best actor to come out of that like young class. He's just got such phenomenal range and is just so good. He's really great.
What's it?
Ironically, I think for Radcliffe though, it's his was it Jimmy Fallon he was on? He did the rap exercise going through the alphabet is the kind of thing that sort of made people take him seriously in a sort of weird, ridiculous like way the popular culture works. Insofar as you're known for one thing, and then people go, "Oh my god, he's actually talented!"
Right. People definitely like to cast judgment on like people who were like child actors or like part of those. Like Robert Pattinson was the exact same thing. People are like, "Oh, he's the Twilight guy," you know, whatever. He looks pretty and he like looks constipated, and that's it, you know. And then you see his career and like you watch him in movies like The Lighthouse, and you're like, this guy can really act. Like he's phenomenal. So it's a lot of times these actors are not one trick ponies, even if the public perception is of them is just that.
Yeah. So some people can do it. Ryan Gosling did a great job of transitioning from pretty boy, young boy actor, A Notebook, etc., to being like one of the real A-listers that
Absolutely.
that there is at the moment. Yeah, amazing transition.
Yeah, what's that show Ratcliffe is in recently?
Miracle Workers. I haven't seen it, but I've heard good things. I've heard
the
he's
first
very funny.
couple of seasons cracked me up like crazy. It was so funny.
Nice.
The last one was kind of a dud, but the first couple were really good.
That'll happen.
But Radcliffe did something quite early on after he finished Harry Potter. He went and did Equus on stage.
Yeah. And
Equus is a role which, quite notoriously, the person in the lead role is completely naked for at one stage on screen. And I think like that kind of role, even though it wasn't like mainstream or otherwise, people are like, all right, this guy's not messing about. This wasn't like somebody cast him because he was Daniel Radcliffe. They cast him because he was obviously quite good and could bring something to the role, and was taking it very seriously and his craft very seriously in a way that other people he could have definitely, a bit like you were saying, he could have taken the easy way out and done the movie, the romantic comedy or whatever for God knows how many years to kind of make his money and then step aside. But he wanted to make a career of his own doing at that stage outside of the thing that he was famed for and became the fame for. So he gets an awful lot of kudos from me for a lot of the decisions that he's made in his career.
Mark Hamill's another one who I really loved what he's done with his career. And now you see him getting back into more live action after doing decades of voice acting work. And he's really good. Just watching Fall of the House of Usher recently, and he's been in a number of different things, separate from Star Wars, where like I've been like, this guy can act. Like he's really got it.
His Joker is probably the best Joker.
Absolutely.
Brilliant, unbelievably brilliant. Like you can watch 3 series of that, and then somebody says, "Do you know, by the way, that's Mark Hamill?" And you're like, "What?"
Yeah,
it's nuts.
That blew my mind when I learned that. I'll never be the same. Yeah, he and Kevin Conroy are for me. It's Batman and the Joker. Like until the day I die,
Mark Hamill's a great example. Just a really great example. Yeah.
What else can we?
There's got to be loads.
What else can we get Varsha into for comics?
Yeah.
Recommendations.
There's a lot of
recommendations.
I'd try Alan Moore too. Yeah. Yes. If you like Neil Gaiman, Alan Moore writes sort of similar-ish stuff in that like dark fantasy, horror, very literary stuff. He's got good superhero stuff too, but like particularly, a lot of his independent stuff is very good. And Swamp Thing too, if you want to go to like kind of a superhero, kind of not thing, it's quite good.
I've had that on my shelf for a while. Yes.
Yeah, when you get to that.
Yeah.
Barcelona, Watchmen will blow your mind. Like it genuinely will blow your mind. Knowing you as a reader, I think it will genuinely. You'd just be like, "What the actual hell?"
Yeah.
I've got to do
in
that.
Watchmen, nobody used the 9-panel format better ever than Watchmen. Mm-hmm. That was nobody can even come close.
Cool.
So good.
Nice.
Alan Moore's a master, no doubt. He wrote a book on the craft of writing comics that is awesome. It's a great book. Yeah. Have you guys read Nice House on the Lake? That was something, a 12-issue series. I guess it's going to go on. It's James Tynion IV, who I have really loved in his indie work. Particularly, I was like, on his superhero stuff.
Is he the guy that did? He did World Tree, I think that you talked about. I think
that's right. That's one of his latest stuff.
Yeah.
Nice House on the Lake is probably my favorite thing he's written. That or Department of Truth, both of which are fantastic. And Nice House on the Lake is one of the reasons I was thinking of it. I read it in trade, but I could not imagine, like you were saying, Chris, like reading it issue by issue, because it's such a slow burn. And the mystery element is so powerful, but it reads like one of those great like mystery box stories, like Lost, except the answers are more satisfying. And just it's very dramatic, and the character work is really good. Very atmospheric. Quite good.
Steve will be delighted to know there's a deluxe edition of it too. Like that, I mean, that's the special sauce for Steve, so he can hold something and rub it.
It keeps him warm at night. Yeah,
you tuck it in. You don't put a special blanket around a hot water bottle. Yeah.
So many great comics, though. I was trying to think what else. Oh, I didn't realize that Nicholas Eames is writing comics now too.
Yeah, you just started, right? Yeah.
Mike read that book, Barbaric. I think
that sounds right.
Yeah.
Do we know yet when the third band book is coming out, or is there any word on that?
Don't see anything. I've just literally Googled it to kind of get Barbaric up.
Okay.
I don't see anything about book 3.
I know he was struggling with it, and maybe he had personal stuff going on too. I don't know exactly the details. I imagine he probably didn't talk about them one way or another. But that was a series. I never read Bloody Rose, but I really like Kings of the Wild. I've been meaning to get to Bloody Rose, but it just hasn't yet. Have you guys read Kings of the Wild?
No.
No.
It's super fun. It's like, I mean, the whole like premise is like, what if mercenary bands were like rock bands, historically, and there's a lot of like music inspiration, a lot of D&D nods. It's just a fun read. Like, it's just like a really good time. The characters are likable. It's breezy. It's quite funny. It's something to put on the endless TBR.
Yeah, it sounds perfect because we are tending to read a lot of very thoughtful kind of so mixing that up with something can be perfect. Actually,
you definitely got it, or at least I definitely have to sometimes, where like if I get too like bogged down, like when I was reading Malazan, I had to like read other stuff in between books, like otherwise my brain was gonna melt.
I heard a lot when I first started book 2, a lot of people were talking about that book, and I thought it looks, and then I heard the premise, and it's like, I don't know if that's for me. It sounds fun, but I'm more of like, Prince of Nothing sounds fun,
right?
Not like a rock band in a fantasy setting. I was like, not sure it's my cup of tea. I'm sure it's great. I just not sure it's for me.
For sure. Yeah. No, it's definitely something where like you have to be into a specific style of fantasy. Definitely kind of like a pulpier kind of adventure. Like it feels like an action adventure movie, really. Like I'm shocked it hasn't been, very seriously optioned to be made, because it seems like tailored. Like the soundtrack is obvious. Right. Like you pull from the decade of rock music. Like it could be like Guardians of the Galaxy in like a fantasy setting, which I guess is kind of what they try to do with the Dungeons and Dragons movie, which I thought was solid.
Yeah, I liked the movie. It was fun.
Imagine that as a TV series. Yeah,
it's fun. A lot of fun.
Yeah, Needle drops. Westworld got 4 series out of Needle drops. Like it's a well-known trope. It's cool.
Have any of you read Monstrous or Saga? Because those are on my list.
Saga.
So I've read a good bit of Saga.
Really good.
Yeah.
I tried Saga. I fell off. It's too much. It was too Star Warsy for me.
Oh, did you think so?
I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what's
I mean,
you know what's great?
setting. Yeah.
Yeah, I just think maybe it's just because so many people compared it to Star Wars that when I went in, I was expecting Star Wars, and it's like, yeah, this is Star Wars. It wasn't bad. I just, again, it's
Not a space fantasy guy.
I'm not opposed to it. It just felt very familiar.
Okay.
Yeah.
The TV heads didn't make it feel weird enough, like unique enough.
Mr. Robots.
And the line, I haven't read Saga in years. I'm way behind on it, but I think I read like the first 30 issues or something and loved it.
I think they took a break for a while, for a couple of years. I think so.
Yeah. Well, it's
Monstrous.
Up to 65,
I have read.
It's up to 65 issues. Saga.
Wow. Yeah. It just came back after a big hiatus.
Well, they're on another hiatus now,
like this year.
But they came back with like 12 more, and then now they're back on another.
Okay, Monstrous is pretty good. It didn't blow me away. I only read the first trade, whatever it is. I have the second one. I've been meaning to get to it. The art's gorgeous.
The art's amazing.
Yeah. Absolutely stunning. But I don't know. I don't know what it was. It just didn't quite grab me.
It's odd. Like this, even how it tells the story, I find it very different to read than most other things. Most graphic novels sort of flow, whereas Monstrous kind of, I think the artwork's really dense or something. It stops you from that propulsion of just going through it.
Yeah, I was reading those when they first came out, the Monstrous, and then I stopped working at a comic book store and I kind of fell off. So didn't keep up with it. But the artwork's great. You're right.
It's great. But speaking of working at a comic book store, Carl, you had some stories for us.
Oh, I have so many. And Jarrod, I mean, if you worked too, I'm sure you have your own stories. It's one of the most memorable ones is about the superhero Metalhead. Now, if you have not heard of Metalhead, that is for a very good reason, because Metalhead is a real-life superhero who exists in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, where the comic book store I worked at was. And I have a picture of him. He used to come into the shop in full costume and talk about the patrols he was doing. And if you can imagine, he has like a domino mask, like a top hat, like a metal leather vest, a lot of like chains and stuff on him, like tight black pants, boots, like combat boots. He had a whole vibe. And the best story, so like he kind of got known around the shop, like people knew of Metalhead. But one day he comes in, but you could say he comes in as Clark Kent, right? He comes in, he is not in his superhero outfit.
Okay.
And but my boss, I wasn't here for this. My boss told me this later. My boss recognized him, and he like kind of calls him over. He's like, "Hey, you're Metalhead, right?" And I go, "Shh, Metalhead is dead." And my boss goes, "Oh no, well, I hope everything's okay." And like Metalhead comes back, there's still a lot of crime to fight. And he said, "Don't worry, like Metalhead will be back. Like when justice is needed, Metalhead will return." And so that's, I have other stories I probably can't really say on air because your podcast would be banned or something. There's just a little NSFW, but you definitely have some experiences working at a comic shop. Most people, the vast majority, like in my experience, totally normal, nice, cool, wonderful people. You get characters though, for sure.
Just the other guys.
Yeah.
Metalhead, huh?
Metalhead.
Did Metalhead make a return eventually?
I don't know. I've never heard an update, and by the time that happened while I was working there, the undercover Metalhead retirement, I don't know. I don't know if he ever came back.
Oh wow, that's hilarious. Jeez.
My question to the two of you is who did work in comic book stores, because I can think of like various types of different stores that I worked in growing up. Like, you must get totally immersed in that world. Like, literally, like week on week, things coming in through the door, and your life's consumed by the next issue of whatever it is. What were some of the series that when you were working there that were like that? You know, that you just like everybody in the shop was kind of right. Oh my god, they're all in this together.
Yeah. Usually it was for me, it was just the big events that were going on with the Marvel DC events. You know, that's what all the most of the fans were talking about. You know, at the time I was working, it was like, you know, the Secret Invasion was going on, and the big events like that. Is because we had a little podcast we did every month on the Comic Couch, and
cool.
every week I meant, and so we'd all would choose 4 or 5 issues that came out that we could talk about, and of course I was always choosing the independent stuff because I like that better. So I would choose something from Dark Horse or what have you, and anything fantasy that came out, I would be like, nope, we're talking about this. But everybody else be talking about the latest issue of Avengers or X-Men or or Justice, Batman, whatever, depending on what big events were going on in the comic world at the time. So
a lot of superhero talk, definitely. I mean, majority. Yeah. There were some indie series that had or smaller publisher series that had their audiences, definitely.
Yeah.
Although I think in a big way, more independent series and small publisher series have blown up more and gotten more of the market in recent years. I feel, particularly in the horror space, horror comics have had a huge renaissance in the last 5 years.
The Walking Dead did a lot to move that forward.
That was a big one. While I was working there, issue 100 came out. I remember a lot of talk about that. Yeah.
I was working when issue 1 came out.
Wow.
Way back.
I'm trying to remember what were...
Right, Jesus.
I mean, all the different stuff that, Marvel and DC were doing at the time. Definitely all the big events. Rebirth was a big thing towards the end, I want to say. DC Rebirth, towards the end of my time at the comic shop.
Whatever.
After all that, when Wally West came back.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the individual series. It's kind of like you were saying, Chris, where I was so immersed in it all. I was reading almost everything that because I didn't even have to pay for it all. I could just read it and bring it back and things like that
the quirks of the
backs,
of
you sellotip,
that I don't even remember what it all sort of it was just a huge world, I mean, universes
began to blend. It really stories. Blends. It's merges into each other. And
I remember the stuff that I was introduced in trade, and that kind of I had Planetary was something that I read. It wasn't coming out then. It was had been out for a long time, but that was something I really loved that I got into while I was working in the store. Invincible. I read all of Invincible that had come out. That was another comic that I think was doing its 100th issue when I was working in the store, or something thereabouts. I don't remember what everyone was talking about other than the events, whatever events were going on at the time. And, all the relaunches. I mean, they still do a bunch of relaunches, but superhero comics make it 12 issues, and then they get, Captain America #1 again. And new creative team, that sort of thing. Or even old creative team, but new #1. What are all their little secrets to try to sell more issues.
What we talked about a lot
what's
was
the new big
Brubaker run on Captain America. That was
great run.
That was talked about a lot.
Yeah.
Since we're all Brubaker fans here.
Yeah.
I want to look this up now. I'm what was everyone talking about? What was coming out? Yeah. You got me curious.
Probably the New 52 was probably, I think you left right before that, after Rebirth.
No, it was after Rebirth came after the New 52. So it was New 52 was like 2012 ish. And then like that's when it started, and it went on for like a couple years or so. And then Rebirth was like 2016. I want to say, because that's when I was leaving. Yeah,
2012 is like last year in my head.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, I mean, I wasn't full time. Yeah, I just did it on Wednesday afternoons. Of course, Wednesday is comic day, right? New comic day. And Wednesday afternoons, I would be there for the podcast and just do stuff. And then I was running the Friday night magic. So I was doing F&M for the store.
Nice.
And that was a trip because, you know, while I'm running the tournament, I'm also watching the register and people come up to buy comics and stuff like that. But back then, they would have the pre-releases, you know, the big release of a new set or whatever, and I would literally run a tournament past midnight into like 4 a.m. the next day. Wow. Like, I was literally there from 4 p.m. to 4 the next morning, running a huge tournament and giving out prizes. And a couple of times I caught people stealing stuff, and I had to confiscate it and kick them out. And it was that was a crazy time. I don't know how the hell I did it, because I worked my full-time job during the day, and then I would be up all night running a tournament at this place. It was nuts.
Wow. Youth.
You meet some interesting people at Magic tournaments, though.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
And you know, I would keep little things of deodorant behind the counter to pass out every once in a while.
Oh my goodness! I thought that was like a stereotype, but it's not. Like,
well, it's a stereotype for a reason. You know?
Yeah. It's pretty bad. It can be pretty bad.
But it's interesting. Like my comic shop now, it's a very different demographic than in the 90s. Like it is a place that all ages, because of the advent of superhero films, I think it has become a very acceptable place to go, as a cool shop to go, you know, in towns and city centres and that kind of stuff now to go see. Whereas it was often in the dark alley in the 90s. It was kind of down a little side street, you know, in there. You secret handshake to get in, and you'll be part of the club kind of thing. Whereas now, you know, my kids are like, let's call into be Forbidden Planet here, otherwise.
Definitely saw similar sort of growth and change from like when I was a kid, because like the comic shop I worked in, I'd been going to since I was like 8 years old or even younger. It definitely changed in a good way over time, where it definitely felt it became, you know, you just saw a wider group of people. You know, it wasn't all stereotypical comic book guys, you know, going in. And we did this thing we called, they still do it, called Superhero School, where like people dress up as superheroes, and it was just this volunteer community, and like teach kids, you know, about comics and superheroes and things. It was a lot of fun. There are a lot of pictures of me out there in different little homemade, you know, costumes and spandex and things. It was
where are these pictures, Carl?
I think some of them are on my Instagram. I don't think I've scrubbed them. They're out there. Oh man, it was a lot of fun though. I miss it because it was just such a great community. You also had your drama, you know, there were like, it's like any group of people where like you inevitably get people who cause shit and talk shit and, you know, which is almost part of the fun. As someone who like wasn't involved in all the drama, was like sitting outside of it, and like, you know, and I was like the high school kid who like was just like cheery and people liked, and was like, you know, I was the punk ass kid was my title that my boss gave me. He always had at least one punk ass kid working for him, and yeah, good times.
I was the older guy, so I was the voice of reason in the store.
There you go. Yeah.
Staying out of the drama in that manner.
That's what you need. Yeah. My boss always got caught in the middle of it. Like he was never like involved in it, but he also would be like a voice of reason and would be like a mediator. And inevitably, I mean, again, the great thing for me was then I got to hear about it all, and just sit on the sidelines and enjoy all the gossip.
It was fun though. It led me to a great event, going to New York Comic Con, being invited there. So that was just so cool. And so all that being involved in the community and stuff is what eventually led me going to there. So it was so cool.
Yeah, I think every group has a person who like talks shit and starts trouble. That's Varsha for us.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
What?
Don't act like you don't know.
I'm just sitting here quietly listening.
Just seeing if you're paying attention. That's all.
Oh my god.
Now that we've established I was paying attention.
To bring it back in, though, Varsha, like I'm sort of like impressed, but also not really surprised that like I can't imagine your first comic book series being Sandman. Like that seems like it would almost put you off for life in some ways, if that's your gateway. Like as great a series it is, like it is, but knowing you and the type of reader that you are as well, it sort of does make sense as well, you know.
It kind of makes sense. I mean, it's a very literary series for a comics, you know?
Yeah.
And so I can see how she would enjoy it.
Absolutely.
She's a very literary person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think in many ways I made for comics and for fantasy series in general, I started with kind of the big ones. I know people talk about like beginner series and things like that. I started with Lord of the Rings is everybody's beginner. That doesn't really count. But I did Wheel of Time. Then I went to Malazan. I guess in a lot of ways, I may have been able to appreciate them more because I didn't know of other ways to do the same thing, So it's it's what I read first. I liked it. Maybe other things will seem less good or different compared to this one. But yeah, that's my baseline now. So yeah, it's interesting. I did love Sandman. I loved everything about it. I'm really glad to be rereading it now. But yeah, it's a great series.
It's one too that I know when I was working in a shop, it was one of the ones that like would get people into comics. Actually, it is a weird, like you wouldn't think because it is very literary.
Yeah.
But I think particularly with women, I found was like that was one of the big entry points.
So interesting.
Because I think it was, a little safer and less, I don't know, traditionally masculine. That's something like a lot of the superhero comics in particular. Although that's certainly changed too, sure. Right? You were asking, Chris, like what were some of the things people were talking about? Miss Marvel first came out. Yeah, the Kamala Khan Miss Marvel while I was working in a shop. I had to look it up, and that was one of the ones. Saga was another big one. That's another one, again, that you could like hand out to a variety of people who maybe weren't traditional comic readers, who would get sucked in then and then branch out and try different things.
Yeah.
It's always interesting.
It's really well done.
To see what
Strangers in Paradise by Terry Moore. I don't know if you've it's an independent comic book, and a lot of female readers with that one as well. Very well done book. It's like a romance spy kind of series, so it's not superhero at all. It's so it's the artwork is just outstanding and it's really well done.
But it's that interesting.
Strangers of Paradise. You gotta look
I love
that up. Sorry, Chris.
I was going to say, it's just, you see those videos, and I've thought about doing them myself, series to get you into whatever, fantasy or whatever. Often the answer is just pick something really bloody good, regardless of whether it's heavy or otherwise. Just pick something that's really great. And don't overcomplicate it, regardless. Like, it could be Malazan. If you've read Malazan and you thought this is really great, that might be a good series for somebody. You know what I mean? If it's just really good,
that's a
you'll go ahead.
great
And the
point,
same
Chris.
for
That's a great point, because it's like you look at the series that basically that won the critical awards. The Watchmen won the Hugo and Nebula award for a reason, and so did some of Gaiman's works as well. And so if that's the type of reader you are, where you're craving that kind of literary experience, read the ones that are winning the literary awards, because they're the ones that you're probably going to like and probably going to delve into more stuff later on afterwards.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that really has, I mean, all credit to writers like Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman. And, I loved and still love a lot of the American superhero comics written back then, but like opening up the industry and really, what we in America call like the British invasion in comics, right? That it really did change the industry, and it changed how people look at comics. I mean, I don't know that you're like average Joe per se necessarily realizes how literary comics can be.
Yeah.
But that's true with anything, right? They just think of Marvel probably and DC, but it definitely made it so that it was taken a lot more seriously as a medium and has a much wider variety of stories told. And I think that's only been good for everything and for the health of the industry as a whole.
Yeah. How much, because I think the movies are going to bring in readers for a different reason than like the recommendations on, from people like us or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm wondering how much, maybe you have an answer, Carl. How much do the movies impact the sales of actual comics, or is it?
When I was working and from talking to my former boss since then, it impacts sales in very specific ways. I mean, one way that you can see it is in what the publishers are actually publishing, right? And like what characters they're spotlighting and things like that. So that, that obviously has an impact. I think the weekly comics, it doesn't affect things very much.
Yeah, right.
Comics have their audience, and any given comic book has its audience, and that doesn't really change unless something very dramatic happens within the industry, or it's like a particularly great run. Stuff like Free Comic Book Day, which was like when like half the sales the shop would make in the whole year happen on a single day. Things like that definitely are much more influenced. And so you do see, an uptick. Like no one was buying Guardians of the Galaxy comics before the movie came out, right? Like that just wasn't happening.
Actually, I did. I watched it.
But suddenly, I did too. I was a fan. I loved Rocket Raccoon before he was cool. And but then suddenly people were coming in and like wanted to read Guardians of the Galaxy comics. And so it definitely has some impact. But I don't think as much in the like weekly sort of polls people had beyond the like, again, like more Guardians comics being published. They hadn't been published for like 5-8 years, something like that by the time the movie came out.
That Free Comic Book Day thing. The owner of my store, he caught some guy trying to get a whole huge duffel bag stuffed with all the free comics out the front door. I'm like, are you kidding me? Because of the few cases, the 1 or 2 cases where one of those free comics actually was worth money a year later because nobody could find them. Oh man, it's just some people
trying to quit the market.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Working retail in general, you have experiences. Oh my God. I worked at Barnes & Noble for 6 months, and it was also just like again, most people lovely, but every once in a while, you get someone where it's like that. I will remember you for the rest of my life. Like,
The one thing that I think movies made a difference is give a lot of comic book stores an alternative way to make sales. You look at the amount of like figures the Funko Pops as even as an idea. They're absolutely everywhere because of that very nature of thing. And whereas, like, I can consider back in the 90s, if you had like a figure or a statue or something on my shelf, people went, of that? They kind of labeled you because of it. Now people look at that and go, that is mega cool, in the same way that I did when I seen it in the shop when I was in the 90s, going like, that is incredible. I actually have a Lost figure, ridiculously. Matthew Fox.
Nice.
Standing on a hill. I lost the base because I get pissed off with it, but I actually have a Lost figure.
You didn't throw it at the TV, did you?
I keep on forgetting about that. Yeah, no, I didn't. No. What's her name? Well, all the people have Matthew Fox. I don't know. I should have got somebody else. But it does give you a way to embrace your love of a certain series, or what is the word that these franchise that you have in other ways other than just the comics or the books or other ways to kind of
absolutely. No, all the comic shops I've seen that have survived have pivoted to not just selling comics.
Yeah,
sell board games, sell toys, sell even movies. Manga has become such a huge thing. Over the pandemic it blew up. And it now sells way better than American comics. Big part of that is like teenagers and stuff. For whatever reason, that's what they're gravitating towards. And the American comic publishers need to. I know they are but trying to take a slice out of that pie. But they have not figured it out yet.
I remember trying to give one of my kids here's some comics, and they would just go, "Oh, look, Naruto." And it's like, oh, never mind, they're in manga. Okay.
But you go into any bookstore at the moment. I don't know if the bookstores are the same in America.
Tons.
The manga section is it's 3 people deep waiting to get at the shelves, and the rest of the bookstore's empty. Which is great, I think. A lot of people go snooty get whatever, they're here wasting their time looking over. Those kids are walking to the bookstore in the free time to go, I can't wait to get to the bookstore. That is the thing that is only good for the rest of the literary work, as they progress through and kind of realize, well, give me more of that type of story, but in a larger sense,
Some will branch out and move on to other stuff.
Exactly.
And for some it'll just be a fad, but for some they'll branch out into other literary avenues,
It's important. Everyone needs their entryway, like Sandman, are talking about, everyone, regardless of what it is. American Gods is what got me back into reading adult fantasy books.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful, it changed my life in that way. And I just decided to pick it up, and my sister's old beat to shit copy that I actually got signed by Neil Gaiman.
Oh, wow.
And it will forever hold a special place in my heart for that. So it's important.
If it wasn't for American Gods, you would not be sitting here right now, Carl.
That's
wow.
True.
Yeah.
That's true.
Credit that, and the other 2 that followed that were the first Mistborn book and Name of the Wind. And so all of those books have a special place in my heart for getting me really back into the genre after not having read it much for several years. I actually, on that note, I need to go. But I will talk to you. You scared me off now.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chris. It was you specifically.
I can sleep so much better. I've always wanted to be a horror character, and I've just made it. Yeah.
Well, it was lovely chatting with you all, and I will talk to you all again soon.
Pleasure, Carl. Take care.
See you soon.
The work here is done.
Go ahead,
Varsha.
Steve, sorry.
No, go ahead. I have nothing important.
I was going to ask about webcomics because I read a bunch of those. I binge read a bunch of those back in college, but did you read any? The ones... webcomics. So, Calvin and Hobbes, I don't know if it counts, but PhD comics, Oatmeal, Saturday Morning Breakfast cereal. I think you guys might like Saturday Morning Breakfast cereal, but anyway, I was curious if anybody was interested in any
web
web
comics.
comics, but
Yeah, I've never been interested in reading anything on a computer until very recently.
I used to read Calvin and Hobbes a lot. The comic strip. I still have those collections here somewhere. I think the only
Yeah.
web comic I've read is was Cy Spurrier's Crossed. Wish You Were Here. It's a extreme horror comic, but it's in trade now, so I have the trade. But I read it. I think it came out weekly, just like a few pages a week, and that's a great great story. Not for the not for
Sensitive soul.
Yeah, it's really extreme. Not the sensitives. Yeah, it's pretty. It can be pretty graphic.
When was the recent most recent boom in web? I know it kind of took off. I can't remember how long ago though. When did you start reading web comics, Varsha?
the ones that all the ones that I mentioned, I binge read PhD comics when I was in college, which is 10, 13 years ago. And I think it's still going actually. But everyone, the XKCD, that's another one.
Oh yes.
So these were all pretty popular when I was in college, and I think they had just started to take off. But XKCD is still pretty popular. Saturday Morning Breakfast Cereal, I think it's doing well. The people who write those comics now are writing some sort of books. Like the person who wrote XKCD, for instance, wrote something called Thing Explainer, and George Jam, I forget if he's the PhD comics dude or the SMBC person, but the PhD comics dude collaborated with some physicists to write a book and say. So I think they've all got into the place now where they're doing other things, but the comics are still going as well. And they're not several pages. It's usually just a strip. And I think SMBC is daily, but I forget. But I love all of them. They're sciencey subjects, which I enjoy a lot.
I know Scott McCloud in his Reinventing Comics was kind of trying to predict the future of comics and stuff like that, and he put a lot of emphasis on web comics in that book. But he was a little ahead of the curve as far as that goes. It hadn't really taken off yet when he presented this kind of thing, and I know Brian K. Vaughan has some web comics that he does with somebody. Then they later collected into a trade or some sort like that. But I know that's something that you can, and I know there's a lot of those web comics that you can, like a voluntary donation to or something like that to help keep them going. But I'm not sure how the ones that don't have that kind of funding, whether they're profitable or whether they're, how they keep in business or what have you, or they just do it on the side. I mean, I'm not sure how it all works, but
I think a lot of them. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say I have a friend who does a webcomic, Marius. If you look actually at my Twitter profile picture, he did it for me.
Cool.
What I was doing, so he did it. He did me in the style of Booker DeWitt from Bioshock Infinite. Actually, is what he did with the Irish flag and etc. But he's done one. I was actually just on his website here. It's called the October 20 comic. He's been doing it from 2011, and he just does it the side. He does a page a week. And he has done a page, and he's about 450 pages or something now of this comic, with audio dramas and stuff. And there seems to be like a real community when I speak to Marius about it. It's like they kind of all push each other's kind of content, even though that's kind of it. So there's like a network kind of goes up about it, and I just think it's a really fascinating space because it's very not what traditional comics is, if that makes sense. He's literally doing a page a week, kind of moving this forward, and then doing like teases and stuff and character art of his other characters, other drawings that he's doing of his characters that he now loves and he's showing to the world and stuff. Like, I just think it's such an interesting space creatively for people to dive into, because his artwork's terrific. Like,
beautiful artwork.
Really, really brilliant, really talented guy. Like without doubt. So yeah. Really interesting.
Yeah, looking at the website now, October20comic.com. And yeah, some beautiful artwork. Really great colors too, really vibrant.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's well, JC and Burns kind of doing something similar, right? Varsha
Right.
with I forget the name of it.
I think he's doing Grim Dwarf magazine.
Grim Dwarf, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I didn't get all the details from him. You have to sign up on his Patreon, and it's free to sign up and to get the magazine. He said something about submission, so I don't know if it's something that he's writing on his own or if he's also accepting submissions. But I think it's a really cool idea overall. So I'm gonna, yeah, I'm yet to go sign up on his Patreon to get the free issues. But yeah. I've got to go do it. I have to remember next week after Berserk. I'll do that.
Yeah, I think he's looking for submissions. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's an interesting idea because he's obviously doing his magazine and stuff as well. You know, all the different avenues, creative avenues, and you know, Joe's obviously a bit like the rest of us, likes a lot of different things and is inspired by a lot of different things. So that's very cool.
Can relate.
I guess the internet also gives you an audience. Like, for instance, the PhD comics thing. I don't know that if they had published it as a magazine. I still think that maybe mostly sciencey folk are probably its biggest audience. Maybe XKCD is popular among software engineers. I don't know what other kinds of audience it has, but those don't feel like they'd blow up if they were in print. Same with, I don't know, what's that series called The Wandering Inn? That's blown up really big,
Paradaba.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of want to read it, but it's...
I mean, each book's like 1,200 pages.
Yeah.
It sounds like a not me kind of series.
Yeah. I read too slowly for that to be something that I read on the side.
I know that Matt from Matt's Fantasy Books raves about that series. But even he hasn't caught up to it. He said it's going to be like the guy writes so much. I think he said like 1,000 words a week or something like that. I don't know, something crazy. And I don't know how you could catch up to that.
No.
So, speaking of authors and kind of a turn, but I'm really curious to hear everyone's thoughts on this author, Kate Coran, I think her name was. I saw articles. It was all over. I didn't see it until it was like a Newsweek or something. But so basically, for anyone who's not familiar, from what I understand, it's an author who had a book coming slated for release in May or something, a few months out. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe she created a fake Goodreads account.
Multiple.
To once.
Goodreads.
Oh, there's more than one?
Yeah.
And she was one-starring reviews of books in her genre? Is that... And also 5-starring her book? Or
I think it's even worse, and I may have picked this up wrong, but I think she was specifically targeting people of color and LGBTQ plus as like almost like punching bags, if you know what I mean. You know, targeting their book specifically, and then owning up to it all as well as say, actually, what you suspect is true, and these are the reasons, which were weak in some ways. Certainly, just excuse that kind of behavior.
Part of me kind of wonders if she meant to get caught, because it's so obvious. Like, either she's the worst troll ever because she didn't like. It's so obvious because it's public what you one-star unless you private your account. Everyone can see this person one-star in everyone's books and then praising other books. It seems like it's pretty obvious who's doing it, or at least it's a coordinated thing. I just wonder. It's just such like what I don't understand is how would that help her? That's what I'm confused about. Like, why? How would that benefit her? I don't know. Unless there's something that I'm missing.
I mean, I only looked at that from the outside looking in. I obviously hadn't heard of her before the post went up and purposely didn't get involved because I hate seeing things like that in a vacuum. where you just get the post at the end of, and you just sort of, like, social media sort of forces you to make a judgment call based on that one thing alone, not really knowing the historical context. But the thing that I took away from it was, like, aside from the fact that the apology is kind of a non-apology, etc., you got to think about the circumstances that led up to somebody doing that kind of action repeatedly. It wasn't just a one-off. It was like,
Yeah.
That's not a healthy space that's being created there, whether it's Goodreads creates it or anything. Like, regardless of whether this one person did it, a lot of people must feel motivated to do it and not do it in a certain way, if that makes sense. I think it speaks more to the nature of the competitive nature of the industry and all of that kind of stuff, in terms of, like, how being a creative and that fear of I'm not good enough leads people to insane judgments, and really poor decisions. And while it's obviously a mental health thing, I also think it speaks to the environment that's created around that and the pressure that's created around that.
I honestly, I kind of feel sorry for her, because it seems like to do something like that.
Yeah.
I think she just, I don't know anything about anything, so I'm just an observer, but I kind of feel like I hope she gets the help she needs, basically. So, but I also feel bad that her mistake means that her career is essentially done, unless she'll self-publish. I mean, the mob will come for her if she uses the same name or if it's a similar story. So I hope that doesn't happen, but it's the nature of the beast.
Like in life, maybe this is just me being a much older person, but I hate that people are never given a chance for redemption, just in life in general. Like, I don't just mean in this one space. People have to be flawless and make mistakes. Like, I'm sure if somebody went through my Twitter profile and went through the amount of tweets I've made over the years, they'll find something controversial I said 10, 12 years ago when I was just an idiot. Like, let's be honest. I think most of us can relate to that in some way, and that you can be hung over the coals, dragged over the coals for that. You see it happen with famous football players or whatever, something that they tweeted about many years. You've got to give people a path to redemption and actually use it as a opportunity for people to grow and learn, and actually have them something and give them a clean slate if they learn from the position. I just think that speaks more about us as a society rather than kind of condemning people to be, you are a racist, therefore that's you dumb for eternity. I just think that sucks. I don't like that.
Yeah, I do think that. I think people in general are more likely to give someone a second chance or the benefit of the doubt if they know them personally.
Yeah,
because you have that human element. You see them, and you see them in their element, and you see them every day, and you have that connection with them. But when it's someone on a screen, it's a screen name somewhere. They're not a person to a lot of people. They're just. It's like there's a person on the other side of that screen. It's not just a random name. So I hope that it works out for her eventually, but it's just such a strange thing.
It's a horrible situation. Like, I don't want to make light of the things that she did because they're despicable. I mean, like, both in terms of where it comes from and what she actually did, but people have to find a path to redemption in some ways. And actually, if she can write a book and has written a good book, judge it in its merits, in the same way as, the difference, separating the art from the individual is an ongoing problem, I think, that we have as a society. But, if somebody's art's good, judge the art,
It's so hard though, isn't it? Sometimes, like, I can't listen to Michael Jackson anymore. Like, I just don't. And we grew up, in the 80s, this, and Jarrod and Chris and Varsha may have seen the tail end of it, but I don't think we'll ever see someone in that. He was just larger than life at the time, late 90s, late 90s even. He was just another. It was wild. His status in the culture, but yeah. So when you learn other things, or at least was alleged to have happened, it's just, even that, it's just like I just can't, like,
he was.
And to be clear, it's fine if you can't forgive that person yet as well. Just say, look, that was a line that was too far for me, and just kind of draw a line in it and say that they are dead to me at some stage. But I think as a societal thing, to just kind of write somebody off and say done. But yeah, the Chris Rock joke about Michael Jackson, I think, I think it's very apt if anybody knows it. The one where he basically says, we loved Michael Jackson so much as a society, we're forgiving the first kid. It's funny but not funny in a lot of ways. But that's how popular he was in some ways, is that people would give him the benefit of the doubt initially. At a certain point until the wealth of evidence became too much. But you put it in a humorous context.
He was the king of pop. So that he had that. That kind of following. That's how big he was, and it's funny because I was never a fan of his music because I was a metalhead.
I don't believe it.
I was a young metalhead, and I remember me and some other stupid young metalheads getting very angry at Eddie Van Halen for doing that solo on his song.
Yeah,
but those were the days.
You ever had an artist like that, Varsha, that you kind of couldn't connect with them after hearing about how they did or what they did?
I think I'm having a bit of trouble picking up Harry Potter. I used to love the series so much, and it's hard to reconcile that with sort of some of the hatred that she's been spewing. I did read her explanation and everything, and it just felt like baseless rationalizations. And I'm like, I learned a lot about friendship and trust and really wonderful relationships from this person. And to see, like, it's difficult to reconcile at the very least. I think I will eventually, because those stories have a very special place in my heart. And I think I might read them differently if I read them again. I do want to go back. For the longest time, I was like, when I have kids, these are the books I'm going to read to them first. And now I'm not sure of that anymore. I'm not saying I won't, but I'm not sure of that anymore. So I do look at everything differently. I'm not going to outright reject it because I, like you said, Chris, I still don't have all of the context. I've read her apology letters. I've read the crap that she did on Twitter, which everybody does crap on Twitter, but so I'm not saying I'm going to outright reject her, but it's been harder for me to. I used to reread them once every couple of years, but I haven't picked them up in several years since.
It's interesting you say that, unfortunately, because like the likes of, say, Kevin Spacey, for instance, I can sort of watch Kevin Spacey films no problem. I don't have any emotional connection to Kevin Spacey in any way other than liking a few of his movies, but I can watch them in isolation from something else. Whereas some other art that I had based an awful lot of my, adoration over somebody like I have it sit beside me, the artist Ryan Adams, which I bought the deluxe edition of. I've been to see 3-4 times live. I completely lived for his music. I connected with such an emotional level. I can't listen to a second of his music anymore. I just cannot. That I just felt and it's such a double standard for me, and I know it is, but the emotional connection and how that was almost the soundtrack to 15 years of my life has been tainted by the fact that he was basically using it as a platform to groom young women is just despicable. Like, it's the very antithesis of what I thought his music was in a lot of ways. And because of that, going from like the most deep emotional connection to it to just being like, I can't disassociate those two feelings anymore.
Now that I think about it, that's because American Beauty was one of my favorite films that I ever watched.
And I do love American Beauty.
I loved his performance in that. And I just, it's tough to look at it the same way that I used to, but it's like you were saying. On the other hand, there needs to be a path of redemption there too, as well. And is he going there? I'm not sure. I haven't kept up with the story, about Kevin Spacey, but.
So he was not prosecuted for it. I think rather than saying he's not guilty, I don't think that's necessarily the takeaway you take from it. But he was, he wasn't.
I don't know. I have no idea whether he's guilty or not guilty. I haven't kept up with the story at all. But because that was a long time ago that movie came out. But but I have the DVD of it, and and I see it on the every once in a while. It's on suggestions or what have you.
Yeah.
And it's one of those movies that if it happened to be on TV, I would just leave it on because it's mesmerizing,
Yeah.
And it's fortunately there's a lot more that goes into that film than just him. There's the directing and the writing is just amazing, and so you can kind of look past him a little bit and just take in the rest of it.
Yeah.
And fortunately, it's not a solo thing like a performance like that guy there, like him. That's more all him,
or a writer.
Yeah,
exactly.
Whereas Michael Jackson, it was all him, so it's
all,
yeah. So it's you get a little bit of distance, cognitive distance in that manner from him,
Yeah, and I have to admit, on a kind of much less serious note, I think there's, because we kind of talked about, I believe we talked about this on one of the episodes recently about, or maybe it was on the forum about, authors that we interact with and kind of like the connections that we think we make, and you kind of learn more about them, and so there's times when I don't go back to certain books because of the experiences I've had with.
That's right.
I think it's a little bit more personal, so it's not as, of course, it's nowhere near as serious, but when it's a personal connection, it's even then it kind of sours you on it. Like it just kind of like, takes away from the experience. So some you have to, I wonder sometimes, is it better to not meet some of these people? Is it better to not interact with them?
It's that old saying, never meet your heroes.
Yeah.
And, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, I was going to say, go ahead, Varsha.
I was going to say, I feel like social media has made it so you're forced to meet your heroes, right? There's a singer that I loved and maybe still do, I don't know, an Indian singer. He said something Islamophobic in a tweet. I don't know if he was, trying to, which a lot of artists are sort of being forced to because of the political situation in India. I don't know if he genuinely believes what he said or if he is just stabilizing his position, whatever. But like now I can't listen to his music without thinking of what he said. So it's just, if I'd never interacted or got to know their personalities through social media, I'd be fine. I don't want to meet. I don't want to know what kind of a jerk you are, and it can be really small things too, right? It's like what he said, for instance, wasn't particularly incendiary or anything. It's just stuff, an opinion that maybe a lot of people share. Doesn't necessarily make him a bad person, but now, we disagree on a very fundamental level, so I can't listen to you anymore. So
yeah, it's a strange facet of modern society in terms that we know people's political beliefs that we wouldn't have known. It would have been the biggest secret. Did you know that such and such is a funder of a right wing? Those things are all very out in the open now, and we sort of make value judgments, especially in art, on other things other than the art sometimes. And I'm not saying it's wrong because we're human, but like that's what you do. But it also makes me uncomfortable in terms of my own evaluation of the art. Thankfully, there's so much of it that it doesn't sort of matter. You can move on to the next thing very, very quickly and go, I found this other favorite thing that I've got, which is ultimately what a lot of us come to creative process for, is to find things that we revel and enjoy in, and then really that is the space that we should probably live in more so. And I don't feel like social media is good for any of that.
I think it's, to your point, Chris, I think it's almost expected when, like in certain industries or certain communities, it's almost expected for you to announce your political beliefs, even though it has no bearing on the work you're doing or the art you're creating, or you may be a good person, but if someone disagrees with you politically, and it might just be a simple, a harmless, nothing serious, a harmless disagreement, and then it can derail your whole career. So it's this balancing act of how much, but yeah, it's strange. And I think it brings us together, but it also maybe makes us farther apart. And it's, I can't tell you how many books I've thrown away from people I've had bad experiences with, or just authors that I've always wanted to read. And I communicated with them and they were a total dick bag to me. And I will never read their books because that's always in the back of my head. Like I just I just don't want to. I lost all the desire to even spend my time or money or on their stuff. So
conversely, I can talk about the number of times I've met somebody that had no intention of reading the book, met them or spoke to them and had a positive experience and went, no, I want to read your book, which is also ridiculous in its own little way. But it speaks maybe more about, the things that Varsha was talking about in terms of I identify with their value and belief system in a way that makes me think that actually I would like to read, I'd like to like what you like, because then you'll have made a connection with people. And so I think sort of apologizing for the fact that we're human and we like human interaction and we like positive human interaction as a way to where we spend our time actually is a thing to kind of say, look, that this is okay to feel like this. This is fine as a way to judge where I'm going to spend my time.
Yeah, and I don't want to sound. I know it sounds really negative, but I've met so many wonderful people, like Steven Erickson, Jenny Wirtz.
Yeah,
we've met like Richard Nell, all these Michael R. Fletcher, Clayton Snyder. I can go on and on and on. All the wonderful people we've met. Anna Smith Spark is fantastic. Zamil Akhtar, Holly Tinsley is an admin on our forums.
Yeah.
I mean, I can go on. There's so many great people we've met, but just like with anything, the negative ones kind of for whatever reason stick out, But, yeah.
And to your point, Steve, like just you starting to rhyme off the names there, the vast majority of all of those interactions are overwhelmingly positive. Like the bit like you're saying, the exceptions stick out because they are the exception rather than more than just the fact that most people are just generally the same. Genuinely good people, different political beliefs or not. Like actually, that in some way is fine with me. Like it's ideologies are fine for the most part, and if you believe something different, then that's sort of it's okay in a lot of ways. But actually, the using things for your advantage, except taking advantage of people, is kind of where the line is drawn. Maybe at some stage,
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Does it feel like, I think for me, maybe this is true for all artists, but people who create stories and tell stories or act and like if I've really connected with their character or the story, it feels like I've learned something about important human characteristics, let's say, what I think is important to clarify. I feel like that hits me harder if I find out that they did something bad, or if they are not a good person, or in whatever definition we use for that. Is it because, I don't know, stories are a more fundamental medium from which like we learn things? That's kind of why it bothers me so much. Some actors, like it's like the theory of what you think is good, but you're not living up to what you're putting out. So that bothers me more. I don't know if it's true for maybe music too, because you have to feel something real to put out good music. But yeah. What do you guys think? The stories feel different if you find out more bad things?
Yeah, for me, yeah. I try not to. It's just hard, It's just especially when it's on a personal level, when it's direct. It amplifies it. Or when it's really something egregious, like some other things we've mentioned. It just makes it. For me, I try really hard not to, but it's hard sometimes to do that.
It's so stupid and so difficult, because what you've basically described there, Varsha, is the fact that you've experienced personal growth through the work of somebody else, right? They've made you question something that you didn't consider, and you kind of go, oh, I've come to a realization about something about myself or otherwise, and yet you then have to reconcile that with the fact that maybe they aren't a very good person. Like,
yeah,
that's tough. Like, I'm sure, like without going completely off piece, like the reason Hitler came to power is because he had a message that people connected to, and at a certain point, people, the reason he came to power is because he could communicate that message and that ideal in a good way. His actions at the end of it make people retrospectively question what the hell was wrong with me or otherwise, but it's the same idea. they experience personal growth. What they thought they experienced personal growth through his message and what they're trying to say. So that's very hard for people to turn around and say, actually, what does that say about me then? And people don't like facing truths about themselves or otherwise. They'd much rather, and I'm not even saying you should, like it's very much easier just to kind of say, can we just move on? Can I just move on with that thought and just kind of park it and put it in a little box and move it behind me? But it does create a difficult situation, and it's often the case of the more you know, the more you wish you didn't know in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes what is that distance necessary for art? Do we need that buffer between the art and the artist to really appreciate the art? Especially now in the climate we're in, is that something that we should strive for? Is that separation between the person? Because everyone has faults, right? So you'll find something wrong with them, no matter who it is. I mean, so I sometimes wonder if we should have not that it's up to me. I just mean, like, should we strive for that buffer to not worry about what the artist says or thinks or does, and just appreciate the art for what it is and what we get out of it? Like Shakespeare, who knows what kind of person he was, but we don't think about that. We just think about what he created, or there's other artists.
That's a great question. Yeah. I think that requires a long essay to answer.
Creative Corner is got
blog post.
3-4 weeks of worth of content now.
Yeah.
To dip through. But I think it goes back to my earlier point about the author who did the review bombing, etc. Like, we have sort of created this vacuum in which she must exist and kind of promote herself. Mm-hmm. And if you're an author, say on social media, trying to promote your book, trying to promote yourself as a thing, like living in fear that if I say the wrong thing one time, that's that career gone. Like that's not exactly a healthy space to live in. Like, I don't know. Like, I could come off tonight. I've had a fair bit to drink tonight, and I could just tweet one little thing and then wake up in the morning and realize that it's been, a little bit controversial or otherwise.
And really, I mean, I don't want not to sound like I'm defending her, but it doesn't feel like she did a lot of damage to, like, she did a stupid thing.
Yes.
That's the worst you can say about it.
And it reflected badly on herself as well, like it did, but...
Yeah.
But then, like, I think her publishing career is in ruins now. The nice thing about publishing is you can publish under pseudonyms, but, that stuff comes out. But, it's not a mistake over which I would refuse to read her book. I might put off picking it up. I might choose a lot of other things, but it's not something that would make me stop. I think it would take, or maybe not. Maybe the racist aspect of it will make me stop. But again, like you said, Chris, there's scope for redemption. She wrote that apology letter. She must have, maybe she meant. We have to give her the benefit of doubt and say maybe she meant it. And I don't know.
I'd rather concentrate on the fact that whether the book's any good or not. That she had published. If it's a good book, I should be able to read it.
Well, I think. I mean, it's like you said earlier. We have so much stuff to choose from. Personally, I wouldn't have any interest in reading this book. It's a Star Wars book, right?
Probably.
So I wouldn't have gone there anyways. But you wonder what you would do if you were currently in the middle of the book, like reading it now. Would you then continue on? And that's when you say, well, if it's really good, you probably would want to continue on.
Exactly.
Yeah, just some mental and philosophical gymnastics to get through, to reconcile the person with the book. If you do find out about the person, like, it's not like everybody looks up everything about the author before you go.
I purposely
buy a
don't.
book.
Like all these sci-fi authors we're reading now from back in the 50s, what have you?
God.
Who knows what they were up to back then? I am not looking up any of them, because I don't. I'd rather just read it and find out for myself whether the books are good and what have you. And if I find out later, then it's like, oh, okay. But
And is it? Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to make a nothing point, but go ahead.
I was gonna say, is it much different from not knowing what kind of person makes this water bottle I drink from every day? Is it? I don't know. Maybe I'll stop buying from them if I find out that they're a bad person, or like whatever gets people cancelled. But if you're not putting in a lot of due diligence there, why would you in these cases? Like, what makes these situations much different? But I mean, I think I'm disagreeing with the point I made earlier, which is that if something touches you deeply or emotionally, I think it just hurts a lot more to find out that they came from maybe not a very good place, but but just on a very high level, I don't think it's fundamentally different.
I'm kind of struck by the idea when you boycott something. Like I have a couple of teenage kids, and when you're a teenager, you deal in absolutes a lot more. This is fundamentally wrong, therefore I'm not going to do this one thing. So, without getting too political or otherwise, kind of certain companies stance against certain wars in the world, and my kids were like, right, I'm never eating McDonald's ever again. I'm never watching a Disney film ever again. And that's, a really nice idea if you're going to support the cause or otherwise. But at a certain point, you want a McDonald's, or McDonald's is the option on the table, and they're kind of like these are massive companies that sort of pervade a lot of society. It is not as easy just to say, I will never, and have very hard lines in your life as you make your way through life. So I think it creates an interesting learning space for people in terms of, is it actually important, or,
it's like, I mean, McDonald's is one thing, but you could probably never go to McDonald's again if you really wanted to. But saying I'll never use like a craft product from Kraft Company, they're involved in so many products in life, you'd have no clue whether or not you're participating in, giving money to Kraft Company. It's so that would be the more difficult route to go down.
For sure. And what happens if you find out after the fact that you have been consuming their products inadvertently for a lot of years? Is the self-loathing come into that, which is a ridiculous concept in another way,
Yeah, I mean, like, I've been a vegetarian my entire life, but I've accidentally eaten meat a few times.
It's a great example, yeah.
A very common mistake that I'm given to understand Indian vegetarians make when we move to the US is pepperoni looks a lot like tomato. So a few of us have accidentally eaten pepperoni pizza. But anyway, like it's not something that I beat myself up. Like, I'm doing my best. If I accidentally make a mistake, it's fine,
Yeah, forgiving yourself is often the very hardest thing people can ever do in general. But that's a small thing, like eating a pepperoni. We never know what your trigger is, Varsha. That's interesting. Or whether it's something bigger, like creating a path for self-redemption is often as difficult as anything else.
Yeah.
Such a strange time to live in. I do see more people craving the distance from social media, and it's not this huge wave, but I do see that things are starting to turn a little. Even Gen Zers are craving, some of them, not all of them. Some of them are on TikTok all day, but I do get the sense that things come in waves, and I do think that we'll see in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see people move away from social media, be more private, crave more of the personal interactions and physical media again. I think that'll be, at least I'm hoping that's coming.
I see quite a lot of that, actually. I experience a lot of it myself. Like you were saying about that, when that situation developed over the week on that person, social media sort of makes you think that you're forced to make an opinion on something and state your opinion on something publicly. Otherwise, your silence is sort of acceptance, tacit acceptance. In the same way as, like, getting too dark, like a member of the booktube community where they have done some horrific things. I personally do not feel it is impingent on every single person that has interacted with them to publicly denounce that person. Yeah. I just think I would much rather just not give it any air at all, and just ignore it and kind of do the things that say I'm not going to interact with that in some way, and just be done with it. Like that does not need brought up. And I think as a community, as one that's, like, I'd say broadly, massively positive, I don't think it's needed that everybody has to weigh in on that and say on that. But if people feel like they would need to, that's absolutely fine for them as well. Each person should be allowed their space to do whatever they want, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that much needs to be said about it. I mean, I think any decent person is in agreement with us. I think
exactly.
Just, it's just kind of like universal. But and plus, I think people who have had really terrible experiences, I think it drums up memories for them too. So that's another thing, is like, just it is what it is, and if you want to look it up, then you can. But I mean, there's not much that needs to be said. It is, that is a terrible situation.
Yeah, and that's a hidden predator type of thing. So it's you people are blindsided by that kind of thing. That's a horror show, to be sure.
Yeah, but again, I think we remember the negative ones, and we forget all the. It's easy to forget, like, all the wonderful interactions we've had over the years.
Yeah, not easy. Yeah, it's been outstanding. So, like we said earlier, I did my 1 year. I've done a 1 year tour now, and it's just been absolutely wonderful, I think.
Yeah, and it's the thing that I think, again, this could be another thing. Just as you get older, the thing you realize in life is that most people are good people and want to be good people. Like, that is just the gross acceptance. I think when I was a younger man, I didn't realize that, but actually at the core, the majority of society is moving in the same direction, and that's what makes it hard to spot the others sometimes. Is that we kind of accept that people are like that, but they
except the people driving in traffic on my way home from work. They're all terrible people.
The fact that you let that bother you, Jarrod, says actually more about you than it's the argument I have with my wife, and she gets very annoyed when it gets to the road rage, and I go, why let it bother you? Like, just take it as a gross acceptance that other people are going to drive like assholes, and you'll be fine.
You can take there's a reason they call us massholes.
Yeah, it's
my husband's one of the nicest people, most understanding people, but he gets road rage. So it's very amusing for me what bad traffic can do to perfectly nice people.
It really is. It brings out the worst in people.
I look over, I'm in the car with my wife, and you can see her starting to grit her teeth. Now, what are you doing? What are you about to do? What is happening here?
It's funny you mentioned that, Chris. Back, I used to do a lot of business travel. I'd travel all over, and every once in a great while, we had a team that would travel everywhere. I was one of those people, and we would meet up. We'd be in the same place at the same time once in a great while. I remember one of the people I talked to, she would travel around, and one of the things she told me I always remembered, she would train people all over the country, even other countries. And she said something similar that, what I've learned is that most people are just good people trying to earn a living, trying to get by. Like, that's most people just good people. Like, I just think I think it's easy to forget that. I think most people are just, trying to live their lives.
Yeah. However is possibly the wrong word. The other thing that people would need to accept, and one thing I say, that everybody on the planet has prejudice. Everybody on the planet, culturally or otherwise, has prejudice. Yet most people spend most of their lives going, "But I'm not prejudiced." And I think it's a starting point that the tacit acceptance that you're not a perfect human being should be a good starting point. But it would lead to a lot less arguments of people not trying to justify their positions or trying to say, "I feel this way because," like, we all grew up in different cultural backgrounds. We grew up with different people, all that kind of stuff. Our experiences shape who we are, and like, I have profound prejudice around certain things. As much as I try not to be, like, it just is who you are as a person. And I think we'd be an awful lot better off if we just accepted that everybody does have prejudices as a starting point, and kind of base most of our interactions with people around that.
Yeah, I think being aware of those and just accepting them and saying, I know that this is something, and to be aware of it and to try and correct it, or at least, have it, to consider it. Because I think we
Consider
all,
it, that's it.
No matter who you are, just something that you're aware of and
100%.
you can chip away at, or just,
So
be better about stuff. So this got serious.
This was all your fault, Steve.
Yeah.
I think Steve spotted some of his drinking and went, "You know what would be great? I could get sound clips, sound bites, everything would be great. We'd be to introduce something a bit controversial, but
No, I think I would hope it's like,
no, it was fine.
I don't think it's anything too crazy.
No.
I think everyone, especially now in the social media age, I think having that direct access with people that creates things that you enjoy is tough. Like, if I was a famous whatever, I would stay far away from social media completely. I'd be private. I'd be mysterious, because I know that I'd say something really dumb one day and forget it.
I'm a nobody, and I'm private, mysterious, all those things anyway. So, yeah.
Which, authors who have to market their work lately, because that's what they have to do for publishing, and especially independently published authors, they have to put themselves up for that kind of exposure, even if they don't want to.
That's
right?
a good point. Because that's speaks to what Steve was saying earlier about the separation from the artists and the people, because, like, before the internet, writers would have an agent, and they would have a publishing company who did all this promotion and did all this stuff, and you'd have that separation that you're talking about, and you wouldn't know much about the person you were consuming the art from and stuff like that. Whereas now the publishing industry's changed so much, in not always in favor of the writer, where they're forced to get out there and peddle.
Yeah, it was a book that used to get marketed, and now it's the author, which is a fundamentally different proposition.
Yeah, I talked to someone recently who was talking about how they don't do social media, and they promote their books with mailing lists and like a blog, and that's how they gather their own, they curate their own client list, and they stay off of social media. They want to be private. They don't want to have their face on anything, because they want to be neutral. They don't want anyone to know if they're male or female or whatever it is. They just want the art to speak for itself. And I'm sure it's a tougher road to take, because it takes longer to do that. But I wonder if being amongst another 5,000 people screaming, "Read my book," or listen to my music, or watch my movie, or whatever, is more productive than having that slow build of. I'm sure it's really frustrating to do that, to have a website and to gather mailing lists and do all that work. But I wonder if it's the amount of time you spend on social media to please the algorithm. Is that time better spent building your own platform on the side that's separate from, because X or Twitter or whatever can disappear tomorrow, and all the things all the time you spent is gone. Or you can have 20,000 followers and nobody cares about your book or whatever it is. It doesn't mean you're going to sell 20,000 copies. That just means 20,000 people hit follow. So it's this weird thing. But I do think that we'll never have someone again in the social media age like Michael Jackson or like a superstar like that, because we know too much. We know too much about these people for them to be this larger than life, they seem like they're not a person. They're just. I think now we know too much, and it's hard to separate.
Yeah.
We see all those little things now, whether it's good or bad. But
Taylor Swift is pretty huge right now. She seems to be doing okay.
Yeah, she's doing good. She's not Michael Jackson or even like I think going back to like even like U2 or like even I hate hair metal, but like Bon Jovi and stuff, like they were. I mean, maybe she's in that level. I think she's pretty popular.
She had the highest grossing movie for a couple of weeks there. Like she's doing okay.
The movie is a flaming dumpster fire right now, though. The cinema is in trouble.
Well, yeah, that's why they're
good.
promoting stuff like Taylor Swift's concert because they're in so much trouble. But she's pretty huge. I mean, she's on Time magazine. That's pretty big.
That's right. She's the person of the year, isn't she? That was not the thing. I have a controversial opinion. Movies. I don't think movies have been in a better state. Mainstream movies, sure, but mainstream everything always was a dumpster fire in a lot of cases. 80s mainstream music, 90s mainstream music, 80s mainstream movies, 90s mainstream. We're all they all work to a formula, but I think we have a greater diversity and range of creators being able to showcase their stuff now than has ever been possible. Same with books as well. The avenues that have been opened in self-publishing mean that we get way more voices and choices now than we ever did. And while the mainstream, you may say, is not for me, we have all the other stuff. And that wouldn't have existed 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Like, it just wasn't a thing. So,
yeah. No, I think you're right. Especially music. There's so much. I always hear people say, like, there's no good music. It's all the same. It's there. It takes a while to go through it, but there's so much great music. It's just finding it as a hard part. There's so many great bands doing great work out there.
Like, you can make a song tomorrow, Steve, and have it in Spotify, Apple Music by the end of the week. Like, that is an amazing world to live in a lot of ways. It is not, get kept the way that it was for most of my life, in terms of you must have reached a certain attainment level or must have reached a certain level of success before anybody could even hear you.
Yep.
Like,
I guess the downside is on Spotify, you can get what is like Snoop Dogg has like 2 billion plays, and how much has he earned? Like nothing. Well, it's money, but it's not 2 billion plays worth of money. So it's a tough thing.
Again, you could say that's Spotify's fault, but it's also classically been the record label model as well. Is that you make a record, the record label makes the vast majority of the money. The artist gets only a small percentage of that all the time. I was watching a TikTok video with Prince talking about Mariah Carey signing the biggest record deal in history, and they were talking, "Oh God, what is this good for the record industry?" And he went, "This is a terrible deal." And he did the numbers of it, and he went, "It's absolutely the worst. It's honestly the worst deal that you could possibly have." Like, I know the big number is thing, but if she makes $1 million, the record company's making 50. It's not a good thing in that way. So yes, Spotify have sort of strangled the music, etc., but they also are a loss-making company every year. Nobody's making money on Spotify either. Like, it's all of witches were horses. It's a weird industry. Very
they just laid
weird
off a bunch of people.
Yeah,
they just laid off
a
bunch of employees. Wild. Well, this took a U-turn. We covered a lot of subjects, though. A lot of topics.
Yeah. We never struggle for things to talk about. That's for sure.
No, we don't. This was great about it.
Yeah, we even outed Varsha as the disruptor. That's people didn't know that.
I'm going to force all of you to sit down and listen to some gossip after this, just because you said that about me. Gossip about people you've never heard of.
She's going to strong arm us into other Buddy Reads.
Yeah.
That too. Funny you should mention that. I actually wanted to bring up that sci-fi podcast for discussion today. So
let's go for it.
Yes.
Let's clear the next 2 hours I will schedule. Let's go. Kim Stanley Robinson, I believe, Red Mars was the book that was highlighted 6 months ago. I bought it.
Okay, good. Let's read it. We'll talk details after we finish recording. But I wanna start that up. I really do.
Yeah.
Things were a bit busy there for a while, but they're freeing up, and I want to start that thing.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. I've been looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
We've come full circle.
We have.
Really.
Yeah, we have. I think we started with alcohol. Did we?
Yes.
We did start with alcohol.
Yeah.
And the audience, anybody that's left listening to this stage is going, the alcohol took precedence at least an hour ago.
At least. Yeah. At least. About 20 minutes in, it was over.
Despite Varsha's best attempts.
So I'm the designated driver of this group.
So in the meantime, Jarrod, where can people find you? And congratulations on 1 year on BookTube.
Yay.
Very
Thank
well done.
you. That BookTube channel is the Fantasy Thinker. You can find me there, and you can find me on pagechewing.com and pagechewing forums, and hopefully I'll be writing some more stuff soon.
Nice. Yes, the anthology stuff is coming up.
Oh yeah,
Yes, very soon.
I'm excited for that.
yeah.
And And Varsha, where can people find you?
You can find me on my YouTube channel called Reading by the Rainy Mountain. And if you can't remember that, you can find me on the Page Chewing Forum by my name.
And me. You can find me on my YouTube channel, possibly, maybe talking about books. My youngest said to me the other day, do you do book reviews? And I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, I used to. So as a show this, I have to get back to doing that someday, but I'll have to read some books to do that. But otherwise, you can find me in the Patreon forums or otherwise. Or might find me here for the drinking games of the 100th episode. That kind of thing excites me.
Yes, we have to plan that. This is going to be, it's a great idea. Yeah, we'll have to talk about that. So yeah, find us all. If you'd like to join us on an episode, check out our forums and join our little group of misfits, I guess, or I don't know what you call us. But anyway, hooligans. So find us there, and thanks everyone for listening. And we'll talk to everyone soon. Have a great weekend.